Hello and welcome to Series 5 of Autism in Conversation with Auticon, a podcast from Auticon, the largest autistic majority company in the world. The podcast aims to help raise greater understanding and appreciation of neurodiversity through fascinating conversations with fantastic guests. Hosted by me, Carrie Grant MBE, each episode will feature inspirational guests from all walks of life who each share a passion for making the world more inclusive. We'll be talking about the many benefits of hiring neurodivergent talent through to some of the more common challenges faced by autistic adults navigating the workplace, plus so much more. All of my 4 children are neurodivergent, and in January 2023, I received my own autism diagnosis as well. So this is a subject I'm incredibly passionate about. I'm really looking forward to facilitating some great conversations about autism and all things neurodiversity. Hopefully, we can all learn something new along the way and maybe even be inspired to do something new or different ourselves. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for the latest episode of Autism in Conversation with Auticon. For anyone who is new to the podcast, one of the things we're really passionate about is shining a light on best practice, hopefully giving inspiration to others who might be wanting to find out more and crucially do more to make the workplace a more inclusive place. One of the things that we see time and time again, often starting in schools, is a very black and white perspective of how things should be done. When people from the neurodivergent community request accommodations to be made, too often they can be met with a rejection on the grounds that if they make one exception for one person, it can only open up the floodgates to other people requesting the same thing. But is that such a bad thing? Moreover, are these rigid ways of working not only outdated, but could they also be harmful not only to the person themselves, but what we're also looking into in today's episode, the actual business itself? Could be harmful to the business. So I'm delighted to say I have a wonderful panel of guests to talk through these issues with me. They are Kirsty Cook, Global Director of Neuroinclusion Services at Auticon, Matt Elliott, Chief People Officer at Bank of Ireland, and Charlotte Valeur, Chair of the Institute of Neurodiversity. What a panel. Welcome, everybody. So we always start these podcasts. We delve deeper, obviously, into the whole workplace and all that stuff. But we just like to find out how you came to be here today and what your interest is in the subject of neurodivergence. So Charlotte, I'll come to you first. Like me, you were diagnosed in your 50s when you received that autism diagnosis. How did that come about?
It was quite surprising to me. It was actually a friend I've had that was 9 years old who said to me, "Do you think you're autistic?" And I was like, "No. Why would you ask me that question?" And I genuinely didn't, even though I had done some work with it around my children for about 10 years by then. But I said, no, I don't see me fitting any of that. And just to prove it, I'll do a self-test online. So I did the Cambridge self-test, and it came out and said, with a blob, just like that, a blob on the screen, "You score above the clinical threshold, you should get diagnosed." And I was like, yeah, no, that's wrong. So I did another one, and I did 10 at least, right? So my first test out of 50 traits, I have 36. If I do it now when I know myself a bit better, I have 42. So literally I'm not like even, what do some people say, mildly autistic? I was like, yeah, no, that's not it. But it's so misunderstood. So I didn't even myself see it coming.
Yes, yeah, and misunderstood by us as we try to understand who we are. So what was that diagnosis like for you once you were given this, like, okay, you are autistic? How did that feel then?
So the very first moment, so obviously you go through hundreds of questions and all kind of things and time with psychologists, what have you. The very first moment they said, yes, you are autistic, I burst out crying because of the thought of what have I done to my children? And that is my biases, right? That is my own biases against someone who's autistic, thinking, how would that have affected negatively how I am a parent? Do I know how to do the right things? Do I not know what was that? And looking back at it, it literally is all my own biases that has been fed by society. That is very hard to not just pick up as you go along, like everyone else does. And obviously over the last 10 years, I've done a lot of work, so it has changed. But that was my very first reaction. And then I thought about it for 2 years before I sort of really started to work within the space more, because I did have a hard time accepting it, which is also because of my own biases, right? I had to see actually that has created my career, but it took me some years to go through all that. But I can see now the reason I have reached what I have reached is because of that incessant drive that the ADHD, which I have also now been diagnosed with, gave me, alongside the autistic ability for me to just really have special interests that I focus on a lot. But of course, it comes with other things that I never understood why I didn't have so many friends. Maybe it's just now I understand it better.
Wow. And with that, thank you so much for your honesty, by the way. There is sometimes, I think, for some of us, a sense of loss or second guessing, like, oh, so maybe a loss of confidence.
Yeah, I didn't have that. I just had to look over my entire life, and suddenly all things sort of fell into place. Why I always felt different to my 3 siblings. Even in my own family, I felt sort of on the outside. Why I just in school just did not perform at all, despite later realizing I have a relatively high IQ. But in school, I was deemed to be dumb. So you see, it has been very confusing growing up.
Yeah.
Why you don't trust yourself and what you're thinking about yourself, because the world is telling you something else, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely relate to that, Charlotte, absolutely. Kirsty, for you, you're the Global Head of Neuroinclusion Services at Auticon. What led you to an interest in this area?
I started out with a very different route into Auticon and neurodiversity than most people. Most people join Auticon because of neurodiversity in some form or another in a personal relationship, whereas for me, it was about supporting the mental health aspects of neurodivergence. And so when I joined, I was coaching our technology consultants with their anxiety and depression and so on. But it was the first thing ever, I think, in my life that was so organic to me. It just clicked. It was just very, very easy for me to relate and to understand the experiences that the people I was coaching was telling me about. And so I carried on coaching and just thinking, I've just found where I'm meant to be. I found my purpose. And I had always had a very strong sense of social justice. So to hear about the underemployment rates of autistic people as well, that was a big, big driver. But it took me 4.5 years of being at Auticon and then raging maternity hormones to realise that I was neurodivergent myself. And I was diagnosed with ADHD in December 2022.
Which is quite extraordinary, because you have, in fact, appeared on one of our earlier podcasts, haven't you? And that was before your diagnosis.
It was before. And you know what? I think it must have been about 2 months before the penny dropped that I realised something's not right here and what it is.
Yeah, or something's very right here.
Or very right is more to the point, yeah.
It's righter than right. Well, I love that. What a lovely story. And for you, Matt, when did neurodiversity first come across your radar?
Yeah, well, I had a general awareness, I guess, like everybody did a while back, but it came through a very personal experience with my son, who's neurodivergent, and he's 14 now, and he's doing really well. He's doing great. We're incredibly proud of him. Before we started the podcast filming there, he just popped in and gave us all a wave when he got back from school. But when Jake arrived, we kind of realised, my wife and I realised quite early on that we were adjusting. We were making adjustments. So whilst I wasn't in any way an expert around neurodiversity, we knew that some things were just working differently for Jake, working better for Jake. A lot of it's sensory. And then when he arrived at school, there was a similar experience, and we got a similar report back from his teachers. And so quite early on, we knew that we needed to do something a bit differently in order to support him best. And then, like I know we've heard on the podcast before, it's tough as parents. You're not sat there with expertise. And I often think about it in comparison to work. Going to work as a chief people officer at Bank of Ireland, and I think that every day, frankly, we can fix whatever it is that's facing us, right? We can prioritize, we've got amazing people, we know we can get things right. But actually, when it's at home, when it's personal, when it's a family member,
right,
you're not in the same control. You don't have the same knowledge, the same abilities, I guess. And so I guess naturally we went through a process of learning and learning more about Jake so that we could do our best to be the best parents to him. And through doing that, we just learned a lot more about neurodiversity. So the interest, very much a personal one, that led to then thinking about, as a result of all of that, well, how does that apply in the workplace? And thinking about it on a very human level, firstly, to be honest, about other parents in similar experiences and just reflecting on that. And then, of course, thinking about other neurodivergent colleagues within the organisation and what their experience was like. So very much triggered and led me down a path of considering, are we doing well enough? And the answer to that was that I realised we had a lot to do because we'd not been asking that question up to that point.
Yeah, that's so important. I do wonder sometimes, like, I know when I'm doing campaigning, you're always looking for an MP or someone in power that's got an autistic child. And it makes me want to bode the question, like, is someone going to be interested in this stuff unless they have some really deeply, very close personal relationship with someone who is neurodivergent? Like, so Matt, when you go into work, obviously you're going to immediately attract every other person that's neurodivergent, every other parent that's got neurodivergent children. How do you win over allies? How do you win over those people who are neurotypical, who've owned the ground for so long, having to share suddenly with people that are slightly different?
Well, I'm really positive about this. I think the question that you've got there is really fair, but from where I'm sat, and of course I'm concerned about my son's future and when he's in the workplace, and that's a really relevant thing to me. But I look back a little bit on my 25 years in business as part of the answer to that. And I think that things have changed an incredible amount over that time. So I think society and the world of work within that are heading down a more positive path. And I reflect back to what it was like when I started work. And the world of HR was going through quite a process of considering, was it strategic enough? Was it analytical enough? Was it commercial enough? And these were good, challenging things for it to be doing. But I think it lost sight of just the human element of people being happy, engaged and excelling at work. I do think that's come back. I think business leaders nowadays are far more interested in how all their people are doing and what their differences are and how to ensure people are supported in the right way. So I think there are lots of positives along that front. And then within the organisation, so how do we convert all of that sort of broader directional change into tangible difference at Bank of Ireland? And so, to be honest, I had a particular moment that sort of triggered me in that regard. And we were back in COVID, in the midst of COVID, doing some manager training. And the training was into some quite difficult areas. It was around mental health support at the time for colleagues, and it included suicide prevention. So we were dealing with some tricky areas for our managers, right? And I think quite reasonably, one of the questions for our manager was, listen, we're behind this, but are you really serious that the ask of us as managers is to support around suicide prevention? And I was at that particular event, and so I gave an answer, and it was along the lines of, yes, partly because we're here, and so we're training to do it. We won't ask you to do something that you're not equipped to do. And secondly, and this has become a theme for us now, we only ask to develop a level of awareness and understanding and to be able to signpost for support. So around these areas, we don't expect our managers to become experts, whether it be around mental health, whether it be around neurodivergent support. But we do think if we provide the right input, the right training, the right awareness, then we can get to a place where our colleagues can help each other and they can signpost appropriately. And I gave, I thought, quite a practical answer. Okay. And the thought that went through my mind was about my son. And it was about what's the workplace that he's going to enter in at that point, about 8-10 years' time. And so I ended up going down a different path. And this is how I like to think about it today, which is that we've got about 10,000 people in the Bank of Ireland. And what we say is that every day amongst those 10,000 people, they have people they care about in their lives, their siblings, their partner, their kids, someone they care for, a friend, whoever it may be. And the way that I like us to think about it is every day those people are somewhere out of our control and our reach, and we are hoping that they have a great day. And we are hoping that the organisation or the care home or the school or the business that they are going into is taking care of them. And so we are bringing caring back into the organisation. It's completely appropriate. It's absolutely commercial. It's about creating the right environment for all our people to excel. And so I say, when you think about all those people that you care about having a good day, when they come home and you talk about it tonight and you've been happy as a result, well, turn it the other way. We have a responsibility to make sure that 10,000 people each day have a great experience, are supported and cared for, and go home talking positively about us. And you imagine the impact that that has. So for me, it's very much about personalizing, humanizing again, how we work with each other. And so we've been on this path for a number of years, in terms of that ethos, if you like. We want everyone to thrive in the organization. And so our neurodiversity approach is very much an extension of that. We want to celebrate everybody's difference. We recognize that everyone's minds are different. We all have different cognitive wiring, and it's a brilliant thing for us to appreciate and celebrate. And that is the basis for how we're actually going to be engaging our colleagues more. We've got a big launch coming up soon around this. And that will be the start point for it. And that's really how it fits with our overall approach in the bank.
I love it. Thank you so much. Great answer. So we've heard kind of how you've all been drawn to this area. What I would love to look at now is just the landscape of the workplace as it stands. Like what's happening out there now? Charlotte, for you, since you received your autism diagnosis, how has your perception changed when it comes to your view of how neuroinclusive the working world is? Are we getting anywhere? Are we advancing?
It depends on what part of the world we're looking at. If you look at it globally, the majority of countries has not really moved forward. If you look purely sort of Western world, then things are happening. People are talking about neurodiversity more. It's a bit of a thing to talk about these days, and for business to say, oh, we have hiring programs. And I sort of say, well, you might have hiring programs. What are you doing with the people that are already there? Because all classrooms are neurodiverse, all workplaces are neurodiverse, the world is neurodiverse. That is the principle of the neurodiversity paradigm, is that we are, as human species, neurodiverse. So what I saw first was this lack of females being diagnosed. I mean, and then I have worked for many years, pretty much all my life, in equality, human rights, and especially gender equality. And this just slapped me in the face straight away. I was like, what? So, okay. So because we present differently to the diagnostics that's been set up against men, we will be diagnosed with mental health illnesses and men will be diagnosed with autism or ADHD. I was like, okay, let's just look at what's actually going on here. Massive discrimination still going on very much. Many people still believing it's just boys and men, generally white and in technology. And it just couldn't be further away from the truth. So the next thing was me realizing that there is definitely institutionalized discrimination going on across the board for people who behave differently, look different, are different. And then, of course, on top of that, everything that's floating around is, let's find some cures. Let's do some conversion training so that all of you behave a bit like the majority. Or let's look into the genes so that we can, abort you before you're born. And so those kind of things really set me off in quite a significant way. As a natural human rights advocate, I just kind of inside exploded because suddenly all this whole new area of deep discrimination became apparent to me. There's definitely like a neurominority glass ceiling as well, right, where you just can't push through, sometimes not even get a job. Many of us can't even get on the ladder in the first place, simply because we interview differently. And it's just so basic, the differences are the things that we need to change in terms of how we not only embrace differences, but actually appreciate it, understand that that's how you actually see more risks, you see more opportunities. And that's not that is not anywhere near. So I'm on a number of different boards, and quite often I have ended up sort of in a minority position, and I thought, why am I looking at this differently? Why can't they see what I can see? And it was actually quite difficult to get people along with me. And then with what I saw, because I'm very strictly sort of pattern, everything turns into patterns.
Yeah.
See something, this is going to happen, and then it happens, but I couldn't get anyone with me, and people go, oh, how, are you not happy? I said, I'm not happy. I'm not happy that you didn't listen a year ago and just waited for it to happen before you could see what was going to happen. And then said, oh, you can look around corners. No, I can't look around corners, but I see things differently. I see lots and lots of little data, little ways of behaving, little ways of doing all kinds of things that forms it just happens, right? That forms something that then comes out. And that's not appreciated in the workplace. And many, many of us do the same. So unfortunately, it has meant for me, after I diagnosed, there's this whole massive area of discrimination going on that I wasn't even aware of. Right?
Yeah. And what I'm hearing there is just like there's real assets sitting in you that are so usable in business and are desperately needed in business. But I'm thinking about, back in the day, it would have been when women, and still happens today, but just women aren't on the golf course, so they're not going to get the roles. And then we've got a similar thing happening, I think, in terms of socializing. Like I find this as an autistic person, I love socializing, absolutely love people. I'm a people lover. But at the end of a day of talking, I need to go and sit in a dark room on my own and not be talking to anyone. That's the point where everyone in my industry then goes out and has a party. Yeah. And that's really hard when you're thinking, I've done 10 hours. I can't actually manage another 4 of now partying with people. And jobs are decided on this kind of basis. That's nuts.
What I did see was when I was in the city in dealing rooms that what I ended up with was a portfolio of clients that were equally sort of different. Somehow, I think the bosses I worked for thought, oh, here's this difficult client, let's give it to her, she's a bit irritating, maybe she can deal with it, right? And somehow it worked, right? And those clients get anything out of somehow I could, because of course, in all our clients, in all our, other stakeholders and interactions in business, we are there too. So of course you need some of us to deal with those of us that are sitting in our, in our networks of businesses. So as a business, if you don't want to service 20% at least neurominorities in the world, well, then just don't have any neurominorities in your business. But if you do have some, like in teachers in schools, we should have minimum 20% neurominority teachers in every school, right? So that there is a chance for understanding us as children. That isn't just one way of thinking. So
starting at the beginning. Absolutely. Fantastic answer. For you, Kirsty.
Sorry, maybe there should be quotas for neurominority employees. We should have at least 20%.
Yeah, why not?
If you are, you fall into this quota. So that's a job for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That should be the first base, right? Okay, let's go to Kirsty. Auticon is something of a trailblazer organisation for sure when it comes to neuroinclusion. Can you explain to our listeners what the ethos of the organisation is?
Yeah, I mean, at Auticon, we've been a neurodivergent majority business for more than 10 years now, which means, it's been our job to be neuroinclusive.
Yeah. You're ahead of the game.
Yeah, exactly. And we've made mistakes along the way, and I've lost count of how many times we've changed our recruitment process to, improve it and to make sure that it's even more neuroinclusive than, it was the last time we run a workshop and so on. And the ethos now being transferred into neuroinclusion services is to pass on that knowledge ultimately, and pass on and empower organisations and individuals, importantly, in those organisations to be able to do this for themselves. And a big part of that is doing it in a way that helps people who do not live and breathe neurodiversity every day understand it. To Matt's point with some of the training that you were saying you were delivering, our managers are busy, they're time poor, they've got a full-time job to do, but there is a lot to learn about neurodiversity to be able to do it well and to be a really supportive manager and colleague and teammate. So we try to make it as manageable and practical as we possibly can, to recognise that that's the best way to teach these groups of people that aren't going to be doing this for 40 hours a week necessarily. But at the core, the absolute core of being able to do this is lived experience. That is the way that we have learned along the way. At the same time, that's listening to our neurodivergent colleagues and listening to the experts that we have in-house that understands neurodiversity. And we try our best to help organisations to do that as well, and to start to listen to the neurodivergent colleagues they already have, that they probably haven't in the past, to some of the things Charlotte was saying. They've not been heard. But that's where the breadth of knowledge is to be able to make the biggest improvements.
So actually, in a way, what you're saying there, you've talked about, they're time poor. So that's a challenge. We've looked at lived experience is probably not being valued as much as it should. Are there other challenges you think that could change the workplace for our neurodivergent people?
I think challenges for an organisation to change, one of the big ones is trust. A lot of neurodivergent colleagues that they already work with, or candidates, have had their trust broken time and time again by previous careers, and even within that particular organisation. And so right at the beginning, as soon as somebody and an organisation starts with the very best of intentions to become neuroinclusive, there is a long way to go to rebuild the trust, and then even further to retain it. Because as soon as you're announcing and you're communicating that we're doing this and we're doing that and we're doing this training, there's an expectation level that's going to be there, understandably, from their neurodivergent colleagues, who you start to maybe feel a little bit more at home than they ever have in a company. And if that gets broken, even just by one individual, very, very hard to come back from that. So that's one of the bigger long-term challenges, I think, for an organisation, to recognise that this has to be a long-term commitment. It's not a one-year exercise and then it's done. It's forever.
Yeah, and also just not an add-on section that we've got, but actually the core of our ethos and who we are.
Absolutely.
Needs
not
to have this embedded,
silos.
doesn't it? For you, Matt, Bank of Ireland is working with auticon at the moment. Why is creating a neuro-inclusive environment good for business?
Well, so I can relate to both Kirsty and Charlotte there in terms of their answers. And to that, I'd say we're a commercial organisation at the end of the day. So we recognise that we have a customer base that is included neurodivergent. So we want to demonstrate and be supportive of that community. But I go beyond that. We're 240 years old. I feel very proud to work for an organisation that's such an institution in that way. And we feel a responsibility to be impactful and support society beyond, if you like, the core basis of providing banking support and services. So for me, there is a responsibility that really drives us, and that is good for business. And I think increasingly society expects organisations to play a broader role, and that's a really healthy thing. And beyond that, I think it's well established evidentially around good business decisions come from better thought processes that are informed by more views. And so however you want to think about that from a diversity perspective, certainly for me, diversity of thought is critical to get to those outcomes. And on a day-to-day basis.
That's super important. So actually, just pause there for a moment, because that's really, really important, that it isn't just, we'll have neurodivergent clients, therefore we might need some neurodivergent staff to work with the neurodivergent clients. What I think it's what Charlotte touched on earlier, that she sees things before up ahead that other people are not seeing. And in business, I talked to someone the other day who was chief executive officer of a massive company. I won't say who they were. And he's autistic. He's autistic. He was CEO. He's no longer. He's retired now. But he was saying he sees patterns. So when he would go into the company, he was known to be very awkward in meetings. He was renowned to be not easy to talk to, and he knew he wasn't, but he knew what his assets were, and he became CEO of that company, one of our major companies out there. And I would love to see that happening. Matt, can you see in a future where that would actually happen?
Absolutely. And I think it, as per your example, and I'm sure in many other cases, whether there is an individual awareness of that or not, it's already the case. And talent and talent accessing key roles, I think, is such a key thing. We know that the autistic community is so underrepresented in employment. And so when I just think about my role from are we getting the best of what's available to us, then we're not at present. That's really obvious to us. And then I think, as has been touched on, we've got colleagues with us today that we need to do more for so that we can get the best out of them too. But I think what's above all of that is an absolute understanding now that diversity of thought and contribution gets you to better outcomes. I don't think we need to debate it. I think it's just accepted as fact. So it's about making sure we create the right conditions for everybody to flourish. And there we recognise we've got more work to do. But I do think that work is part of a continuing creating of a culture in our organisation where everyone can thrive. A lot of what we are doing when we think about neurodiversity and neurodivergent support actually is beneficial for everybody anyway. It's progressive for anyone anyway. So all this adds up to just becoming an organisation that people want to be at and can really thrive in. And as Kirsty said, I absolutely take the trust point. We need to create trust in the organisation. As we step further into neurodiversity, the first step has been about better understanding. So actually, we've done work with Auticon to really assess and analyse where are we today? What's our start point as an organisation so we know what we need to improve? But I think the other critical thing we've done is listen to our colleagues. We've set up a group whereby we can get real insights as to what it's like today. And from that foundation, we're then moving forward to make sure that we've got great awareness through the organisation. We do more work with managers to help them and put in place an approach that we're calling a passport to an inclusion passport. And at various life stages of being in the organisation, we take checkpoints with colleagues, either as they join us or at various other stages along the way to say, how's it going? What needs to be adjusted here? Through to really basic things like how are meetings happening? Is everybody able to make a contribution within a meeting in the right way? The manager and the report relationship, how often do they check in? How do they check in? Would it help to have an email every day with key things, bullet point or not? And so everybody's different. Everyone throughout our organisation is different. And we're looking at these, what sound like, quite basic techniques, but I think they're critical to make sure that we're providing the right support to everybody.
Thank you, Matt. Charlotte, you're scribbling away there, I can see, making notes. What are your thoughts on hearing, that's Bank of Ireland, what they're trying to do? Is that the right way? Do you think that will work?
I think there are many, many different ways of doing it. I think this is one very right way. I mean, when we talk about CEOs, it would be interesting to hear the actual percentage of neurominority CEOs. It could be a lot higher than we think it is. But female leaders, I met a lot of them, had neurodivergent children, and they said, we think our husband is also. I was like, what about you? And about 50% of the ones self-tested high, right? So maybe they were female leaders because of being a neurominority.
Wow. What an amazing thought. I'd never even thought about that.
We are a huge population. That's the problem. Many of us are hidden. We are not part of the statistics. And I think we could have as many as 70, 80% of us hidden. And they're the ones that get out, get a job, get on with things, blah, blah, blah. And therefore, they have no reason to seek a diagnosis. All of those of us are hidden, but it then becomes apparent at some stage, or maybe, and now it's opened up. But I think that hidden group of people, we shouldn't underestimate just how big that is. Once we have that opened up, we will then have the right statistics. And I think we might see that we have been measured as a community, as a neurominorities against those of us who has additional struggles, disabilities, mental or physically, and that has become who we are. And that's the narrative that's been written. But the 80% that are hidden is not part of that narrative. And so what we can do now by us coming out more is actually protect those most vulnerable people within our community who struggle speaking up for themselves and who are not getting proper treatments, right? So also in workplaces, more leaders. I've spoken to lots of groups of leaders, mostly sort of CEOs, board members, and I always say in the room, I can guarantee you at least 20% of you in here will be neurominorities if you look into it. And that is part of what's made you a success. It's not Richard Branson. It's not despite having dyslexia. that he's been successful, maybe it's because of, and I think he says that himself, Elon Musk, right? It's very underestimated, and all the numbers are very wrong. So I never refer to them because they're wrong.
And Charlotte, is some of this about, and it's probably the same question to all of you, is some of this about creating cultures that work for whether someone has a diagnosis or not, actually? Just a different, what might that culture look like so that it can include those hidden neurodivergent people? Charlotte, how do we do that?
My perspective, it's absolutely everything about culture. And I guess what ION is actually trying to do, which is a bit of a steep ask, we try to change the world culture around differences to broaden the bands of what we see as normal. I hate that word, right? But right now we have a worldview where there's this
the ideology.
Group, and here are the normal ones, and then there's all the not normal ones dotted around there. We want that circle to broaden, encapsulate all human beings, because we are all human beings. And then we have which are actually quite small compared to the bigger piece of us who's the same, but there's a big focus on it. So the culture around differences needs to change, and we need to understand that we need those differences. Nature has put us here for a reason, and that is so that we can think differently about certain things. It's not, we're too many to be all a mistake, right? It's not.
Yeah, right.
There's for it. And we need us to, for evolution and this, go in and go, I don't agree on that. I don't agree on anything. Please don't tell me what to do, kind of thing, right? Because if we are all doing the same thing, we would not have come out of the caves, right? We need fully not just embrace and awareness and all this, but appreciate that differences are necessary for us to move forward cognitively and evolutionary. And that's the place, that's the North Star. A world where we don't need diagnosis to be allowed to be different or to have their proper support. And it may be a North Star that we will never reach, but if we don't know where we are going, even if it feels unreasonable, then we can easily go wrong. If we keep that North Star in mind, a world with no diagnostics where everybody's needs are met, that's what we support, whatever it takes in all the different areas.
Thank you, Charlotte. And Kirsty, do you see changes in the culture in business? Have you seen where it's not just like, again, as an add-on, but there's actually a core culture shift? Do you see that?
It's starting. I wouldn't say I've got very high expectations, I think, for businesses on this. So maybe I'm not the best person to ask, but I can't label one company that I can say, yeah, they've done it and they're successful at doing it. I am biased because Matt's on the call here as well, but they're doing a fantastic job at Bank of Ireland and showing genuine commitment to making this work. And I think that's the difference you can see with some companies of how genuine it is versus it being a tick the box exercise because they should probably do it because some people have told them they should. So yeah, it is happening, but it's slower than I think most of us would like.
Yeah, and I hear that. And you are right there on the coal face. So that's the kind of answer I would have expected. For you, Matt, you've got your son there. You want the world to look different by the time the race is on. By the time he's 18 or 21, you want him to be able to enter into a workplace where there's a culture where he's seen as just part of the pack, part of the people, he brings what he brings. Are Bank of Ireland getting anywhere close to that?
Well, listen, I think that's both true, but also I've got people in the organisation today whose children are in the world of work, and indeed I've got people who are neurodivergent in the organisation today too. So it's here now, and I get that. I think we are thinking differently around this. I don't think this is something that the world of work has been quick enough to. And I would argue in that sense, I accept in that sense, actually, that we're no different. But look at the sort of fundamental shift here, and I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to be upbeat on this. I do have a positive outlook for the world of business. We definitely need to challenge ourselves more. I definitely feel like I have a period of time, whilst Bank of Ireland continue to put up with me, to be able to make a difference in the world of work. But I would just point to the fact that, so I talk about our organisation as being somewhere I want everyone to be welcome and everyone can thrive. All welcome, all thrive is simple. I think we need to move away from narratives and terminology that's corporate speak and bureaucratic. Essentially, let's boil it down. That's what we want at Bank of Ireland. We want everyone to be welcome and everyone to thrive. And when it becomes as simple as that, everybody can engage in it and everybody wants it. And nobody, I believe, disagrees with it. And so that simplifies our effort at that point. And it means it informs us in ways like it's definitely appropriately stretched us around how we support our colleagues. And I'll give you a couple of examples, not necessarily related to neurodiversity, but it means that we do step into the space where if our colleagues are suffering domestic abuse, and we have a policy and a really clear support framework around that now, so they know we are here to help. It may be an issue from their, if you like, personal life rather than work, but we want to help. Likewise around mental health. It doesn't matter to me whether the issue originates in the workplace or whether it actually originates in the personal life in some way. We're here to be part of the solution. And that's an organisation that's setting the culture that is right. And as I say, when you extend that around Neuroinclusion, I think we can really celebrate everybody's difference. And yes, there is a way to go. And yes, we need to definitely upskill our ability to do more for those with neurodivergence, but we're well underway. And that's where I'd be very positive and upbeat about the future and the prospects that we have.
I love the way, Matt, in all the answers you've given, you have a really holistic approach. In fact, all of you have got a very holistic, it's whole person, not just whole person, but whole family, because we come with everything, don't we? We don't leave our family. The family still are in us when we're coming into work, or whatever the things that we care about in the world travel with us. So I love that holistic approach. Thank you for such great reflections. So we've come to our final part of the show, which is where we get a little bit reflective and then take a look towards the future. So one of the things I love most about the podcast is that we get to shine a light on some of the brilliant work that people are doing out there. We know from the feedback that we get from both listeners and also people who are interested in making improvements in their own organisations, that it's helpful to have a blueprint or at least some tangible ideas as to what best practice looks like, so they have something concrete to aim towards. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask each of you to give me an example of an individual or business that you think is doing something really fantastic to help make the working world more inclusive. Let's go to Charlotte first.
Thank you. We at Iron, we work with a number of big businesses that are working very hard around neuroinclusion and broader inclusion. And so one of them is Jacobs Engineering and Harbour Energy. They have some amazing initiatives where they lift neurodiversity in a broad way for all the different neurotypes and really make people feel inclusive, listen to what people want to do. I think best practice, we haven't really found best practice. We are still sort of at the early days, I think, of finding our way through what actually works, because it effectively, it does demand a bigger culture change. If you can't have neurodiversity sitting isolated, very much what we're talking to, it goes across all the intersectionalities, and we are also in all the intersectionalities. So that holistic approach is super, super important. But those are some that are, kicking in the right direction. And obviously we have very big organizations that are spreading the word because they're global, EY, Microsoft, IBM, and they're doing something for their employees that work sometimes doesn't work. I mean, we are still finding our way, and it's great to see that. What we want to ensure at Iron is that we, as neurodivergent individuals, have a voice in all these changes. That is not just happening to us, because so far we haven't had a voice, and that's why it's so important to have an organization that pulled us together, as opposed to the governments, the businesses, whatever, because we need to be united globally to have a voice. Only through having a voice do you have agency, and can you actually influence for change, and that's what we are here to do.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for that, Charlotte. For you, Kirsty, is there an individual or an organisation that you're like, those guys have got it right?
I actually couldn't think of a one answer to this, to be honest. I think the difference with some of the companies like Charlotte mentioned with Microsoft and EY and so on, and even Bank of Ireland that are doing it and starting to do it well, is that they're carving out a way that works for them and their business, as well as obviously the neurodivergent individuals. But I think aside from businesses, there are individuals that are making a difference that you probably don't know about, but they're probably parents, they're carers, there's something that's really invested in them to make a move, and they're doing it really subtly. It's not a huge impact. It's not in the public eye. It's not on a social media platform, but they're introducing neurodiversity to their event that they've been doing forever. And for the first time ever, there's neurodiversity on the panel. Or that they, are just starting to raise it in their boardrooms and their conversations. And so they're planting that seed there. And those people go unrecognized, but they're the ones that are making some big strides actually with these small steps in the long run.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. That representation, intersectionality. And for you, Matt, an individual or a company that you're like, wow.
Well, you know what, Carrie, I really like going last. It gives me a chance to think about what I'm going to say.
Of course it does.
I've got a couple of, if we can keep that going to the end, please. I've got a couple of thoughts on this as a result. So one's an individual and an organisation, and then an organisation. So I'm going to cheat just a little bit. But when I think about that question, I think we make a lot of progress when we feel mainstream day-to-day things are changing around us. And one way that I see that is autism in racing as a company. So you'd have to sort of check out if we're still looking at Twitter X and the things, I don't know. I'm feeling challenged on that front nowadays. But they also have a website. So I'm not, I enjoy horse racing for sure. I'm not an incredible fan, but I've noticed this organisation, and there's a guy who works with them called Bobby Beavers, who is a presenter. He works on radio and he announces at race courses. And I just caught it along the way. He's from Sheffield originally, as I am, and I just connected with it. He is an incredible advocate as an individual, but they as an organisation, they're taking a sporting area, making it accessible. So they have race days that are autism friendly. They have physical facilities at the race courses, many of them now. They're really building momentum. I think it's just amazing to see a sporting industry pick something up like that and really take it on. And lots of amazing work as well around therapy units and approaches with horses as well. So they're taking quite a broad approach. And it's clear that Bobby, when you hear clips of him speaking, I've never met him. I've just heard clips and heard him on the radio. He inspires around it. He's autistic himself. His young daughter is. And he's able to turn that for real good, right? So I think that's amazing. And then I just want to mention another institution with the Irish connection for me, and that's Dublin City University. It gets shorthanded as DCU, obviously in Dublin, and they are an incredible university. And so for many years now, they have had an ethos of supporting those who are maybe more disadvantaged in society, including around neurodivergence, into work. So they have a specific approach around that. We work with them around what's called an access program. So students at the university come in and do intern work. And these are students that might not get those opportunities otherwise. But the list of things they're doing as an organisation is incredible. I'd really suggest looking them up. They were the first university to be an autism-friendly university in 2018. I was at their campus the other day. It's an autism-friendly campus. There are quiet zones that you can use. They have a full-time coordinator around autism, awareness training throughout the organisation. The kind of list goes on. Very innovative things around. I know they're developing an app for future students who haven't arrived yet to be able to become familiar with the campus before they've arrived and actually seen it. I think they should be very proud of the work they do, and it definitely sets a standard.
I really love this idea that, like, when I'm thinking about young people going to university where their individual reasonable adjustments might be met, that's a very different thing to becoming an autism-friendly university, because that's a bit more in the whole. It feels like you're more in the centre rather than, we're thinking about you there on the edges. I do like that. Okay, so let's have a little look forward. What changes would you like to see over the next 10 years to help make the workplace more inclusive? We've kind of covered it, but I'm sure there's more we've got to rinse out of this. So, Charlotte, what would you like to see in the next 10 years? So
10 years go very fast and big changes. Quick. But I'm back on the culture. So I've been looking very much at other minority movements, such as the Black movement in America. And Martin Luther King wrote a book called Chaos or Community. And on one page of that, after the Black people in America got the vote and believed now they had equality, they then realized, of course, that society hadn't actually changed at all and widespread discrimination was still going on. And he finished that one page in saying, what seems to have happened is that white people have not looked at their own inbuilt racism, and they're not willing to. So what I would really like to see is actually all non-neurodivergent people looking closely at themselves around their own inbuilt biases, and that becomes something we learn in school. And if we don't learn this in school, it won't be brought into the workplace. So we do have to look at what feeds into the workplace, which is people coming out of school. And we need to teach children from very early on that bullying someone because they're different is not on. There need to be zero tolerance. Somehow, I got bullied and beaten relentlessly in school and to and from school, and I never understood why, because I wasn't talking, I wasn't doing anything. They still wanted to beat me up. I come home, blood nose, what have you, and I always said to my sister, do I have bully me on my forehead? What's going on? And it was simply because he could feel the differences, and somehow nothing happened to the bullies in school. I had to hide in and I'll get beat up in the school ground. No, it was not a great childhood, right? So, but the bullies, nothing happens to them, right? And we need to shift that around. And you can't make a workplace secure and psychologically safe if people are allowed to have microaggressions or, not so microaggressions and, literally discriminate in very obvious ways, talk to you in a bad, name calling. We can't move on with proper inclusion if we don't grab hold of that.
I really hear what you're saying.
That is the depths of what we need to reach into.
Charlotte, I think so much of what you speak about, there is you're clearly an activist, but it's working outwards. But there's the way, just taking you right back to the beginning of this podcast, when you talked about your own biases, that inner activist, we need that, don't we? We need to both be an outward activist, but also that inner activist that looks after ourselves, that cares for ourselves, that challenges ourselves, that is curious about our own behaviors. I love that. Thank you. Kirsty, let's come to you next. If you could look at the landscape in 10 years, what changes would you like to see?
Yes. So my big change in 10 years would definitely be shifting this emphasis and reliance on disclosure and needing people to share and expecting people to share and encouraging people to share their neurodivergence, particularly when we're in a society where access to diagnosis is so hard, and we don't see any changes happening in the immediate term in that. But I think this goes further than in the workplace. And Charlotte's absolutely right to go even further to schools. My husband's a primary school teacher, and the amount of debates we have over the lack of support they can put in place because a child doesn't have an EHCP is not fair and it's not okay. But this learning continues into the workplace because ultimately those children go into the workplace and then they become the managers. And so we need to, have a big transformation, I think, on this emphasis and taking a much more universal, strengths-based support needs attitude that's much more human-centered than it is right now.
When you talk about disclosure, you piqued my interest. Could you just expand on that a little bit more? What you mean by that?
Disclosure. I prefer the word sharing, but I think most people know the word disclosure. But sharing so that somebody has a diagnosis or identifies with a neurodivergent condition. There's a lot of companies that come to us, and the question is, how do I encourage more people to share? We can't support without them sharing or disclosing, and that's just not the case for everything we've discussed today, actually. But some won't make those neuroinclusive changes without having some sort of disclosure process or so on in place, which to a degree is needed in some respects, but in 10 years, I hope it won't be.
Yeah, I really hear you on that. And that's a question we have looked at in this podcast before, that so many people daren't tell anybody that they're autistic because they know they'll be judged. They'll be, there's immediately, it comes with a whole raft of things that are going to come at you as a result. Yeah,
exactly. That trust there again is really important for somebody to feel comfortable and safe enough to not only share, but know nothing's going to happen on the back of it as
yes, well. Exactly. I love that. Thank you, Kirsty. And Matt, for you, what would you like to see on the landscape in 10 years' time?
Well, I just like to say it's very difficult to go last because I was going to say what Charlotte and Kirsty have both said, of course. So I'll now think of something else. So I think for this session, I've been thinking about it very much from a parent and a business perspective. I can't get into the discussion about schools. It would take another podcast and not be very constructive in terms of my current mindset, right? And an experience around that. Not now, great place now, but overall there's a huge amount to think about and do differently, I think. But then when I go to the business world, as you've heard, I'm going to take the positive in terms of the momentum that's there. I think business can really help lead at times society and societal change, and that should be the ambition for business leaders. And I think that comes in all forms of organisations. When I think about business, there are good examples. The Mayor of Dublin has an ambition to become an autism-friendly city, and everything that comes with that, I really recognise that ambition, and that comes down to leadership. So in the end, what I want to see over the next 10 years is more leadership. And I think the right leadership in all organisations will bring through the culture change that we've talked about today, really, the culture change of understanding that everybody has something to offer, but that needs to be appreciated. And at times it really needs to be supported for it to become the reality. And that's my hope for the next 10 years.
I love that. I think often we don't realise the power that we have. And businesses, whilst they know that they're powerful, they don't always understand that they have the power to change culture, society, wider culture. So I love that idea. Guys, you've given such brilliant answers today. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared and brought to the table. My guests today have been Kirsty Cook, Matt Elliott and Charlotte Valeur. I hope you've enjoyed the show and I look forward to speaking to you next time. Thank you so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Autism in Conversation with Auticon. If you'd like to know more about the podcast, would be interested in applying for a job as an Auticon consultant, or would like further information about how Auticon can help support your business to be more neuro-inclusive, please visit auticon.com/UK. This episode was recorded in February 2024. Recording and production was by Strathmore Studios in Clerkenwell, London. It was engineered by Alex Brown, edited by Billy Godfrey, and the music was by The Lethargies. That's all from us this time. Thanks again for listening, and bye for now.